Apache Revolver. This is less a gun and more a criminal's entire toolkit crammed into one object. Built in 19th century France, the Apache Revolver combined a small pinfire revolver, a folding knife blade, and a set of brass knuckles into a single weapon with no barrel at all. That's not a typo, it genuinely had no barrel, which made it wildly inaccurate and honestly dangerous to the person firing it as much as the target. It wasn't built for soldiers or hunters, it was built for street gangs in Paris, small enough to hide in a coat pocket and versatile enough to stab, punch, or shoot depending on how close the fight got. It's one of the strangest weapons ever mass-produced because it was never really meant to be a good gun, just a nasty surprise. Treeby chain rifle. Imagine a revolver, but instead of a cylinder, it has a giant chain looping around the outside of the gun loaded with individual chambers. That's the Treeby chain rifle, a British design from the 1850s that tried to solve the reload problem by linking chambers together like a mechanical necklace, feeding fresh rounds into the barrel one after another as the chain rotated through. In theory, it meant more shots before reloading than a standard revolver at the time. In practice, the exposed chain mechanism was fragile, prone to jamming, and expensive to manufacture, and it required a very particular kind of care that most soldiers in the field simply didn't have time for. Only a small handful were ever built, making it one of the rarest oddities in firearms history today. Duck's foot pistol. This gun looks like someone took 4 pistol barrels and fanned them out like the toes of a duck's foot, and that's exactly the point. Instead of a single barrel, the duck's foot pistol fires all of its barrels at once in a spreading pattern, sending multiple bullets outward in different directions with a single trigger pull. It sounds excessive, but it actually had a very practical origin. These were carried by ship captains and prison guards who needed a way to control a crowd or a mutiny with one shot, since a single spreading blast could hit multiple people at once without needing to aim carefully at any one target. It was less about precision and more about making an entire room think twice. Ring pistol. This might be the smallest firearm ever seriously manufactured, a fully functional pistol built directly into the body of a ring, worn on the finger like jewelry. The barrel sits where a gemstone normally would, and pulling a tiny trigger mechanism fires a single small round from point-blank range. It wasn't built for combat or hunting, it was built for concealment, the kind of weapon meant for someone who needed a last resort hidden in plain sight, disguised as a piece of jewelry rather than a weapon at all. Because of how small and underpowered it was really only effective at extremely close range, more of a self-defense surprise than a serious firearm. STG-44 with Krummlauf. The STG-44 is already historically important as one of the first true assault rifles ever built. But German engineers took it a step further with an attachment called the Krummlauf, a curved barrel extension that lets soldiers shoot around corners without exposing themselves. The idea was built specifically for urban and trench warfare, letting a soldier tuck around a wall or the side of a tank and fire at an angle no straight barrel could ever achieve. The problem was durability. The curved barrel put so much stress on the bullet and the metal itself that the attachment wore out after only a few hundred rounds, and the more extreme angled versions barely lasted any time at all before becoming useless. It was a brilliant idea that the technology of the era simply couldn't keep up with. Harmonica Pistol. This gun earns its name because the barrel assembly slides side to side inside the frame just like the reed slide on a harmonica, shifting a fresh chamber into firing position with every pull. Instead of a rotating cylinder like a revolver, it used a flat sliding bar of multiple chambers, giving the shooter several shots before needing to reload. It was an inventive attempt to increase firepower before revolvers had fully taken over, but the sliding mechanism was slow to operate and prone to misalignment, meaning a jam could leave the shooter fumbling with an oddly shaped bar of ammunition at the worst possible moment. Winchester Liberator shotgun. This is one of the strangest spy gadget weapons ever designed, made almost entirely out of stamped sheet metal, cheap enough to produce by the millions. The idea, developed during the Second World War, was to airdrop these crude weapons into occupied territory, so resistance fighters could ambush an enemy soldier at close range, take his rifle, and then discard the disposable gun. It wasn't built to last, it wasn't built to be accurate, it was built to be nearly free to manufacture and completely expendable, a one-time tool meant to arm an untrained civilian just long enough to even the odds for a single encounter. Protector palm pistol. Picture a small metal disc that fits entirely in the palm of your hand, with a squeeze trigger sticking out between 2 fingers. That's the Protector palm pistol, a genuinely bizarre design from the late 1800s built with no visible barrel or grip at all, just a round housing you clenched your fist around to fire. It rotated through several small chambers with each squeeze, and its entire appeal was concealment. It didn't look like a weapon at all sitting in someone's hand or pocket. It was marketed heavily toward personal self-defense, especially to people who wanted protection without carrying anything that visibly resembled a gun. Josselyn Patent Chain Revolver. Much like the Treeby rifle, this American design tried to solve ammunition capacity using a chain of connected chambers instead of a traditional rotating cylinder, feeding cartridges through the gun in sequence as the chain moved. It was patented in the 19th century as an attempt to squeeze more shots out of a handgun than a standard revolver cylinder could hold. But the moving chain mechanism made the gun bulkier, more mechanically complex, and far more prone to malfunction than the simple rotating cylinders that were already proving reliable. Like so many chain-fed firearms of the era, it remained a novelty rather than a serious replacement for the revolver.